And I think we are all set to get going. And I'm really excited for tonight's masterclass with Dr. Natalie Lerch. Can you all see Natalie clearly on your screens? She's waving. Very good. Well, thank you all for being here. Natalie, this evening is going to present a masterclass called Operatic Women, Characters and Composers. And this special masterclass is in celebration of Women's History Month, and we'll explore women's history, roles, and contributions to the operatic world. This masterclass will begin by tracing the roots and evolution of women's roles in opera, starting with the roles that women have played on stage in opera as an art form. It will then dive into the work of women behind the scenes and front and center as composers. Along the journey, Natalie will touch on how women's roles in society are reflected in operatic roles, how a woman's quote unquote character is portrayed musically, and you'll take a look at what contemporary composers are writing in opera now. Of course, with every single masterclass series that we have, this is recorded, which means it'll be available on demand both to you and to those that signed up and are not here live this evening. And the last bit of our presentation this evening, typically the last 30 minutes, will be a Q&A session. But in chatting with Natalie, I would encourage you to use the chat function substantially. And if you really have a pressing question, I think she's going to be comfortable with you unmuting and just asking that question, because right now we only have 16 people and that seems manageable. But I will be here to help with muting and to help with the chat as we move through the presentation. So before I officially introduce Natalie, I would love to give you a bit of information about her. Some of you may recognize her from previous semesters of Encore University, but since receiving her DMA from the Eastman School of Music, Dr. Natalie C. Lerch has taught voice, diction, repertoire, pedagogy, chorus, chamber singers, chamber ensemble, opera and music theater workshop, ear training, piano for voice teachers, and musicianship. That's a lot. All at the Cornish College of Arts. She has a substantial performing career and has received faculty development grants to record her arrangements of folk songs and Christmas carols with her vocal ensemble Fine Rain Falling. This group performed Natalie's arrangement of the national anthem for 2,000 people at the Rain FC Women's Soccer League and an evening concert. Fine Rain Falling recordings can be heard on YouTube. Another grant enabled Natalie to attend the McCloskey Summer Institute of Voice in Seattle, and she continues to give masterclasses focused on the art of combining acting and singing. She has given masterclasses at the NATS, National Association of Teachers of Singing, regional conference in Portland, Oregon, as well as the National Classical Singer Convention in San Antonio and Chicago. And here's a really fun, interesting fact that is included in the bio that I want you to know. She recently, although probably not that recently, received her certification in the Masterson method, which is a method of equine bodywork. Natalie's into horses, and in her free time, she rides her horse, Mocha. Such a fun name for a horse. So would you all please join me in welcoming Dr. Natalie Lerch?
Thank you. It's great to be here. I really have enjoyed teaching my classes at Encore University, and so it's nice to be back and just see some familiar faces. So here we go. We're going to delve into women in opera, and I call it characters, music, and composers. A short introduction. Brian already talked a little bit about my background. A little bit more about that. My doctorate from Eastman was in vocal performance and literature, but I also had a minor emphasis in opera direction. I had a chance to work with the juniors in the opera scenes class, and I also got to direct Johnny Skiki. So that was a really great experience for me. So when I moved to Seattle and started teaching opera scenes at Cornish, I felt like I kind of had my footing underneath me and I knew kind of how to get started. My master's from Ohio University was in vocal performance and literature with a minor emphasis in vocal pedagogy. So I also understand how the voice works and what you have to do when you are laying down and singing in an opera, how are you supposed to get your breath to work when you're laying down on some pillows? I've actually had to do that. It's very fascinating and kind of fun to work on. I've taught for 23 years at Cornish College of the Arts. My professional singing, I've sung with opera choruses, choral music, soloist with orchestras. I'm an arranger for small women's ensembles. And then I've taught the classes for Encore, Shakespeare's Women in Opera, Breathing for Singing, and Diction for Singing, which I've enjoyed preparing all of them, just like I had fun preparing this presentation tonight. Now I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a moment, because this is what I always do. When you're trying to put together a character, you have to really include three big pieces of that. There's your voice and the vocal technique. You've got to have all of that underneath you. You've got to be able to sing the role. Then you've got to have music and musicianship. You've got to understand how to do the different dynamics, why you would do articulations that are staccato rather than legato. And then how does all of that tie into the character and the drama? All of these things have to work together to reflect the character's emotions and convince the audience that they should care about what you're doing, right? I have always felt that vocal technique influences character and can assist character. And character, doing your character work, can help your vocal technique. I don't see them as ever being separate. So when I'm teaching vocal warm-ups, I tell my students, this needs to be a giggle. This needs to be hysterical. This needs to be melancholy. And when they start singing with those ideas in mind, all of a sudden the technique, the breath, everything flows in a different way. And I think they have fun. It gets them out of their head a little bit and into the character. So, okay, now I'm off my soapbox and we'll go on. All right, women's roles. One of the things we have to, in order to think about roles, we have to understand the Fach system. And the Fach system came from the German school, really about understanding your character, your voice, and how those work together to really present yourself well and naturally. And so there, in Europe, it was much, at least in the last 20 years, 30 years, it was much more confining as far as what roles you were supposed to sing, right? For me, being a lyric soprano, I should not be singing dramatic coloratura or soubrette roles. And if I go into an audition and I sing one of those pieces, the people evaluating me would say, she does not know her voice. She does not know what roles she is well suited for. And so that's kind of how this came about. So I just want to look at this really quickly. It's really quite interesting. The soubrette is the light, younger, middle voice, C4, which is middle C, to 2 octaves above that, which is the high C. And those characters are Susanna, Despina, Zerlina, Musetta, Nanetta. They're the maids. They're the young girls, right? So that's a particular type of voice, and they have particular kinds of music that's written for them. Then we have the lyric coloratura, the light, high, young, crazy kind of voice. C4 to E6 or F6, that's the high E or F. That is usually Norina, Gilda singing Caro Nome, Lucia doing the mad scene, Olympia, Blanchen, right? We've got those roles, and they're very, very, very high. Those were never my roles. Lyric is beautiful, strong, but not heavy. Those are C4 to C6. Again, the same basic range as the soubrette, but the tone is different. The legato is different. They're not heavy, but there's a strength to the sound that is not the youth of the soubrette. These roles would be Michaela, Mimi, the Countess, Baby Doe, Manon. The dramatic coloratura, we all know these, the C4 to F6. This is the Queen of the Night, Violetta, Norma, Fiorligi. right? They're really strong, but they have to, not only do they have to have flexible and fast notes, they also have to sing legato line. That's something that the lyric coloratura does a little bit less, right? Then we have the spinto, which is the light dramatic. These, oftentimes these roles can be sung by a lyric soprano or a light mezzo. They are C4 to B5, so that's just a slight shortening of the range. We're talking about Susanna from Carlisle Floyd's Susanna, Rusalka, Donna Elvira. I think of her as being a spinto. It's a little bit more mature kind of a sound. Then we have the dramatic, the really heavy, powerful lower range. This is the B below middle C to a C6. Lady Macbeth, Aida, Ariadne, right? We've got some of those roles. And then we have the Wagnerian voice, which is the heaviest and lowest of the soprano range. Notice the F3 to C6. That's quite a range. That is not me. Those roles, those voices are more rare. And so if you have that voice, you can work in opera. Isn't that nice? All right. Then I want to go through. I've got a few. I hope you're not seeing. Are you seeing my Zoom window up there? My Zoom share?
Not at all. It looks great,
Okay,
Natalie.
good. Thank you. So then we've got the mezzo soprano roles. Notice that they don't have as many categories, and I think it's because they share some of the soprano roles, right? So we've got there's no soubrette because most of the Zerlina, Susanna roles could be sung by a mezzo who has the right voice type, right? So we've got the lyric. These are the light, kind of steely sounds, if you know what I mean by that. The sound has a little bit of an edge. It cuts through the orchestra. Notice the G3, so that's the G below middle C to the high B. These are the pants rolls. We're talking about Cherubino, Romeo, Sesto from Giulio Cesare. And then we've got Dorabella and Mignon would be those kinds of roles. So Dorabella can be sung by a soprano and can also be sung by a mezzo. The coloratura mezzo roles. I think of Angelina from La Cenerentola, right? Cecilio Bartoli just sings the heck out of that role. It's just wonderful. We also have Rosina from The Barber of Seville, not Rosina the Countess from The Marriage of Figaro. It's slightly different music that those two characters are given, even though they're the same character from one opera to the next. Then we have the dramatic and fuller sound, the lower tessitura, G3 to A5. This is Carmen, Dido, Charlotte from Werther, Delilah, Eboli. And then we have the contralto, the heavy and lowest range, often comic and quite rare. And that is the F3, the F below middle C, to the A6, the high A. We've got Lucretia, the witch from Hansel and Gretel, Ruth from Pirates of Penzance, and Katisha from The Mikado. All of this information, I just Googled the Fox system because I wanted to get some real clarity. I've studied these, I have them in a variety of books, but I thought I want to be able to give you kind of the meat of what we're talking about here. And this information was on the Halifax Opera website. It gave vocal range, weight, and color, and it has all of the Fox system for men as well. Since this is Women History Month, I did not include the men's stuff here, but it is available. And I can do that in another presentation if you would like. So then we have women's characters. So how do the women's voice types relate to their character types? So if we look at the soubrette, we've got the maid or the feisty young woman who is going to buck the system. And again, we've got Susanna and Despina and Zerlina. They're the soubrette roles, and they do have character. Then we have the righteous singer, the lyric or the dramatic lyric. Um, we've got Micaela, Aida, and the Countess. Then we have the mother, the wife, the strong character. Again, we have the lyric soprano or a spinto. Alice Ford from Falstaff, Fiordligi from Così, Dido, and Mimi. Of course, then we have to go to the mad, crazy, and abused side of things, where we have the dramatic or lyric coloratura. We've got Lucia, Ophelia, Angelina, the Queen of the Night. So do you see how these are kind of going together? This is what I find really, really interesting. The seducer or the seduced, the bad girl, right? We've got Carmen. We've got Manon. She's kind of the seduced, whereas Carmen is the seducer. And then you've got Susanna from Carlisle Floyd's Susanna. Her character, so that opera is so interesting over, I'm not sure what the span of the opera time period is. It's like maybe a month or two, something like that. But she starts out as this young, innocent, beautiful young girl that's just has stars in her eyes. And through the opera, she is raped and cast down, and she becomes this bitter old woman by the end of the opera. I think that would be just a fascinating role to work on. Then you've got the flighty, right? The kind of the lyric coloratura that is kind of bipolar a little bit, I guess I would say. Dorabella, right? Dorabella, she's either really, really happy or she's, oh my gosh, everything is terrible. Carabino, he cannot decide what girl he wants, right? And then we have Gilda, right? She's just madly in love with the Duke. Then we have the conniving or the kind of the power hungry kind of woman, the dramatic, could be a soubrette. I think of Despina. She's kind of sneaky, right? She's in cahoots with Don Alhambra, I think is the character that teams up with the guys in Così to try to fool Fiordligi and Dorabella, right? So she's kind of sneaky back there. And then of course we have Lady Macbeth, totally wanting power, going mad because of it. We've got Salome and Turandot. So I find this kind of look at women's characters really, really interesting, which leads us to their music. So if we're looking at the maid, right, the soubrette, oftentimes moderate tempo, not terribly slow, not terribly fast. It's a more medium range, you know, C4 to C6, but they don't have to hang out on high Cs. They're not singing really fast coloratura stuff. They're sassy and they're determined. And they are strong in a certain way. Then we have the righteous, right? The Micaela, the Aida. Usually these lyric and dramatic roles, the tempos are moderate or slow. They often have long lines, sustained singing. You've got to really have a lot of great breath control. And they're a little more melancholy in the emotions that they're going through. We have the mother, wife, who is a strong character, a lyric or spinto. We're talking about Alice Ford, Fiordligi, Mimi. Wide range. Think about Fiordligi's Come Scolio, right? Big leaps, crazy singing. Can be fast and slow tempi. There's still sustained music, but also they have some coloratura in there. So you've got to be able to move your voice a little bit. We have the mad, crazy, abused. Again, fast passages, right? Very, very high. Oftentimes they are giddy or hysterical. They can be bipolar. They can kind of go from you know, being really, really sad to being really, really, to be laughing and hysterical in 2 measures of music. We've got the seducer or the seduced, the bad girl. We've got Carmen, Manon, and Susanna. A lot of ornamentation, Still some big leaps, so you've got to be able to move your voice up and down, and a lot of chromaticism. The flighty, right? Dorabella, Carabino, Gilda, the lyric or the coloratura fast passages, and a lot of tempo changes within their music. I think of Non So Più for Carabino, right? There's this, and then they slow down, or and then it goes faster, and then they slow down again, and then the end is kind of slows down, and ends fast. So that's the kind of thing that I'm looking at when I think about those particular characters. And then we have the conniving or powerful characters. A lot of times their music is kind of cajoling, right? It's kind of sneaky. It's on the surface very nice, but there's a little undercurrent of something in there. It can be tongue in cheek. Usually a moderate tempo and pretty solid singing is needed for these characters. All right. So here we've got some musical examples to listen to. I hope they don't all start playing at once. They did. No, no. No, no. No, no. That was funny. All right. So we've got Carmen, Aida, and Lucia. So what are we going to listen for? We all know the habanera, very chromatic, some sexiness in there, right? A descending pattern that has some real interesting music to it. Brian, do you think should I make these larger or should I just play them in this box? If you have a thought.
I think you can leave them in
Just,
that box.
yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go with Carmen. I just want you to listen to, we're not going to listen to the entire 4-minute song, even though it would be lovely. But what I want you to listen to is her inflection. Look at her body language. Where is she focusing? And how does she use her voice? Right? So these are all things. How does she use musicianship, dynamics, articulations? That's what I kind of want to play with here. So here we go with Carmen. Okay. What a great aria. What fun to sing this aria. I've worked on it just for fun because sopranos don't have those really fun kind of sexy roles, not so much. And there's something about that descending chromatic line. And I love the way she kind of digs into some of and adds a kind of warmth and forwardness to her singing that really kind of sends that sound out to grab Don Jose, right? I can't remember, is it Don Jose or Don Jose? I forget how to pronounce it because my um, my sister's ex-husband's name is Jose, but he's from Portugal. So I kind of forget how to pronounce that. Anyway, um, there were some different things she was staged to do, right? Leaning over really and showing off, what she's got to offer a man. Um, she also did that thing. I don't know if you saw how she did the kind of the bullfighter thing with her what she was washing. That was really interesting. That was timed really well. And I thought I had never noticed it before until I was looking at that clip. And I thought that's bringing in character, right? With the whole idea of the opera and Escamillo, right? Who is also her love interest. So this is bringing things together in a really interesting way that I love. I'm trying to think of other things. When she's singing the L'amour and she has those portamenti, that's another way of kind of connecting things emotionally from low to high or high to low. And I think composers use that for an emotional response, both from the singer and also from the audience. Okay, then we have Aida. And this is like my favorite clip. I play this every so often and it almost always makes me cry. So I'll try really hard not to tear up. This clip is it's just the little bit of the end of her singing and the last 2 minutes or so of this clip that we won't listen to is all applause. And it's her farewell performance at the Met. And what is so astounding about that is how she holds her character throughout that 2 minutes of applause. So if you ever have a chance to watch it on YouTube, it is amazing. And it's just what a celebration of what she could do as a performer. Just wonderful. So here we go. Let's listen to. Now this soprano, strong character, sustained high singing, but also has to be able to dip down into the lower part of her range, right? It's really range consistency here. Okay, it got me again. All right. Wow, isn't that amazing? What beautiful line, incredible breath control, and it's all in that character. It's just gorgeous. Gorgeous music, gorgeous singing, wonderful acting. Can't get better than that. until you get to the mad scene. Now we've got the coloratura, we've got the crazy kind of weird thing that's happening to poor Lucia. This is not the mad scene, the duet with the flute. That is another whole thing to listen to that's astounding. This is Natalie Lerch. And again, what I want you to listen to is the quality of the voice and what she has to be able to do with her voice to show how this character is losing it. Like she's gone around the bend. Here we go. And so then she does that again. She sings this section again and she ornaments it, and it goes even higher and it goes even crazier. So hopefully you'll have time to delve into some of these recordings at some point. Just listen for the quality of the music and how it matches the voice and the character. But we move on. Oops, too far. Okay, so, oh, why does it keep doing that? Okay, so now I don't mean to make anybody mad, but we do have to consider who was writing these roles, right? Men were the ones who were the composers, right? During the last, 300 years or more. And it's, if we lived in a matriarchal society, would women have written roles for men that were sort of stereotypes? Yes, most likely, because we would be writing about men from our point of view. So men are developing these characters, and they're, why do they develop them the way they did? What was happening? We have to ask ourselves, what was happening culturally and politically when these operas were created, because things changed over time. What were the composers' relationships like with women, with their mothers, their wives, their daughters, their lovers, their sisters? Is in Carmen, is it the battle of the sexes, or is she just a femme fatale? Right? These are questions we can ask to try to figure out why her character has been created the way it has. What tragedies in the lives of composers happened that happened during the writing of a piece, or right before, or maybe right after? Verdi lost his wife and children during the composition of Nabucco. Did composers write their music to be used socially and politically, or was their music taken and used for that purpose? And then why? So I read an interesting article from the World of the Habsburgs. It was online. And it was talking about the chorus of the Hebrew slaves from Nabucco being used as a hymn of freedom for Italy's independence and unification. I've heard this for years, that in this article, this is now being disputed. They didn't give a whole lot of evidence to me either way. And I decided that would be really good fodder for a class or another presentation. But I think that delving into some of these questions, we could also delve into why women composers now are writing operas the way they are. It would be really interesting to look at the past and to look at the present and then see what's going to happen in the future. But wait, there's more. So then we can also look at history. What things were happening historically that composers said, oh, I can write an opera about this. So in history, we've got the coronation of Poppaea, I always say that wrong, Giulio Cesare, Gloriana. We've got, I mean, a lot of history things, right? There's so many historical operas, not hysterical, but historical. Societal attitudes that changed during the French Revolution. We've got The Barber of Seville, Marriage of Figaro, and then John Adams? No, John Corleone's Ghosts of Versailles is really interesting. It has all of these characters from the French Revolution that are singing. They're ghosts. It's really cool. And then we've got the dismantling of aristocratic privilege in Don Giovanni. We all know that one. But then we also have the heroic wife of a political prisoner in Fidelio. We've got political persecution, the dialogue of the Carmelites. Civilian uprisings, Boris Godunov, Aida, Simon Boccanegra, Don Carlo. Then we've got some current headlines. Well, not totally current, but Nixon in China, Dr. Atomic, The Life and Times of Malcolm X, Armistead, and Dead Man Walking. This was just produced at the Met in 2023, and I just saw it, part of it, on PBS last Friday night, Saturday night. It was just on. Joyce DiDonato was in the role of the sister that works with this man who's on death row, and I did not see who was playing that role. And I think you might all remember the movie that was, I think it was Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn, that was made probably 8 or 9 years ago, that was Dead Man Walking. So I looked at the Lyric Opera of Chicago website, and they had a really interesting article about politics and opera. It was written in March of 2021. There was a lot of great information there, a lot of more stuff than this. So if you're interested in looking at a little bit more of this kind of a topic, we could go there. There's a lot in this one slide, and I didn't have time to delve into all of that because I really wanted to get to current operas. Women opera composers specifically. I found an article, again, online, The Guardian, that had the 10 best operas by women. And these numbered, started in 1625 and they go all the way to 2011 or 2007, something like that. So we have Francesca Caccini. And I tried to find, I think I found a little clip of this. The Maria Teresa, we do not have the whole opera. That was 1750. Notice that in the 10 best, we start in 1625 and then we go over 100 years before there's another female composer that has kind of a name in there. 1753. Then we go another almost 100 years to 1835 with La Casa Disabitata. And that one's not available either. There's no score left, but you can read reviews about it. Then we go to 1904 with Pauline Viardot with Cendrillon. She wrote quite a few salon operas. So these were small operas that were really, I don't think they were as staged. They were more that people got together and sang them in their houses together, which I think is kind of like, it reminds me of the music by Fauré and Debussy, where they would get together in people's houses and the composer would play and singers they knew would perform, and it would be this nice little salon concert. And I think that is kind of the idea here. I could not find any information about the wreckers or the numbered, but that is something that I could do some more research on. And then we have Thea Musgrave, Mary Queen of Scots. I've got a great clip of that. Judith Weir has written several different operas. King Harold's Saga is very interesting. It is an a cappella opera for soprano or mezzo soprano. It is about 15 minutes long, and you play, I think it's 8 characters in that 15 minutes. You play King Harold, the 2 wives, you play the messenger, you play the soldiers. I forget who else, and I think I have the score right up here on my bookcase. I did it for a concert at Cornish, one of my faculty concerts, and it was very challenging to learn and very fun to work on all these different characters. She has written several other ones more recently. There's also L'Amour de Loin, written in 2000, and then Alice in Wonderland, written in 2007. That one was really interesting. I looked at a bit of it. It did a lot of speech singing and used puppetry. So those were very fascinating. So let's listen. Wait. So let's listen to a little bit of Puccini. So there we really have mezzo. I don't think she's really a contralto, but she's definitely the heavier kind of dramatic speaking kind of role. And of course, something to think about with this particular style, this early style, is that there were fewer arias per se. It was much more speech singing, much more recitative like throughout. And then you would have these little moments, and then you would have the chorus come in that would sing the madrigal. I had the opportunity to go to Italy and sing part of Monteverdi's Orfeo in a rehearsal kind of setting in Orfeo, Italy, and it's a hill town. And so what we did was we actually took our madrigals and the different pieces that we were working on, and we would go down into some of the caves and the caverns, and we would sing them down there. And all the people in the town got to know us as the American Cantari. And so we would go to the grocery store or the market or something, and they would ask us to sing for them. So we would just start singing one of our madrigals. It was really fun. The music is quite different. It's very speech-like. And here's the fairy aria. This is a concert version. And I could not find this staged in a way that made any sense. Most of the other arias were by men, for male characters. So let's listen to just a little bit of this. Again, now we're talking about 1904. We're talking a very different style, maybe a little bit of a throwback to the Romantic or an extension of the Romantic period. Wow, nice control on that. Um, Beautiful dynamics, singing, needing to really sustain the role, the breath, the sound, and coming off those high notes and then being able to sing middle voice, right? And just really being able to shift your into a new register. It's just really amazing. So I think that's really beautiful singing, but very romantic to me. Okay, this one is fascinating. Dramatic soprano. Mary Queen of Scots. This again, this is from a celebration concert. So not in character, or not in costume, but definitely in character. Amazing ability to put this music, the vocal music with the piano music. This is tough. This is where your musicianship really is going to help you if you're going to sing this aria. So we need to listen to this, the sustained and the skipping around that she's got to do from low to high. Okay, pretty challenging music. Takes a kind of heftiness in the middle range for the emotion that she's going through, and to not kind of oversing. So that's pretty amazing. And I'm fascinated by trying to put together the piano and the vocal part. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, King Harold's Saga.
It is the year 1066. At the royal palace at Oslo, King Harold of Norway recounts his previous triumphs on the field of battle.
So, a lot of drama there, and you are carrying it by yourself. There's no piano, there's no chorus, there's very little set. It's really all about investigating those characters and really being able to bring them to life and have them be different in your head so that your voice can change its color and its shape and its inflection. A really fun challenge. Whoops, there I did it again. All right. This one is very interesting as well. And um, I found an interview with the composer and I think the director, and they talk about creating the set. And it was Love That Is Parted. And they do this thing with LED lights to create the water that comes between the two lovers. I love that. I think that is really, really interesting. Um, that's my presentation for this evening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's given you different things to listen for when you're listening to music and listening to singers. If you have any questions, if you'd like to bat some ideas past me and you want to get in touch with me, my email is nlerch796@gmail.com. And I hope to hear from you. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Natalie. That was wonderful.
Oh, good.
Did any of you, since there are just, I see one full screen of folks here, so feel free to unmute yourself if you have any specific questions, or you're welcome to use the chat. Does anyone have any questions about tonight's presentation or Natalie's work? Oh, hey, Mary, how you doing?
Yes. First, Natalie, I want to say thank you. I think it was last semester, you had the diction. We did the diction for singing, and we learned the IPA. So useful because we're doing Va Pensiero.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
So my question live too, I think, regarding the Fox system, are you pretty much born with the voice? You know, you have a voice. Could you change?
I think that's a great question. And it's one that, people are constantly, what type am I? I get that from my college students all the time. And I always tell them, well, first of all, how old are you? And remember that women's voices mature in their 30s. And so you've got, possibilities. I think that, you know, you have a certain range that you're born with. You have a voice that you're born with. It's in your instrument is your body. And so there are certain things that you can't change. You can't change the size of your larynx once you have matured into your basic height, and bone structure, right? That is kind of set and created for you, which is what makes us all unique. And that's why it's so enjoyable to listen to different people sing the same aria, because it sounds different, because everyone has their own individual voice, and we want to celebrate that. I do think that certainly when you're younger, typically we have usually a higher range when we're young, and we sound young. And so we're going to be more singing, and we look young. So we're going to be cast in roles like the soubrette, the light lyric, the younger roles. As we mature and our larynx, our cartilages, right? The whole larynx system is cartilage, except for the hyoid bone, which sits in here and is a bone that the larynx hangs from. As we mature, our cartilage begins to ossify, becomes bone. And so we lose flexibility. That means that we lose a little bit of the stretch of our vocal folds. And so it means that we maybe can't sing quite as high. What I've noticed as I have matured is that there's a richness in my lower range that I didn't have. I once had a voice teacher tell me I would never have a chest voice. And I was crushed because I wanted to sing musical theater and I couldn't belt. And I stopped taking from her because I thought I refuse to be limited in that way. So I did musical theater, and I found a teacher who helped me understand how to access my belting. And then as I matured, all of a sudden these low notes have come in. Like I can sing an F3 without a problem now. I don't know why. I can still sing my high C. Is it as easy to sing the high C? No. Darn it. I have to work a little bit harder, got to warm up really well and know what I'm doing up there. But technically, I can still do it. I've actually sung Ds when I've been teaching some of my students who are singing Ds. And I go to say, well, you got to go like this. And I do with character, and I get there. And it's like, oh, who knew? Would I want to do that in performance at this point in my life? Maybe not. I'll do the C, because I know if I've got a C if I've got a D, right? So that's where I would go. So I would say that, so back to your question, sorry, went off on my own little rabbit hole there. I think your voice does change over time with maturity. And that means that if you couldn't access Carmen when you were younger, you can as you mature, because suddenly you've got the richness in the low. And you also understand more about your body and relationships, and you can really sing that role and understand the character and what she's going for that you might not have been able to do when you were 18. So, yeah. And I think if there are roles you always wanted to do, you should sing them. You should just sing them, right? If you want to sing, some coloratura something, find it in a lower key, right? Why not? If it's just for you and it's expressing something that you never got to try, oh, have fun and see what you can do with it. See what it feels like to try to be that character. That's why I got into acting, was just because I like to play. I like to make believe. And that really carried me through. Did you know? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. How would you characterize Lulu?
Lulu?
Yeah.
Good question. Probably a little bit dramatic, a little bit lyric, a little bit coloratura. Right? Because it's kind of that kind of going nutty, kind of pinging around music. It's not really tonal, so you've got to have like a flexibility. Certainly have to be a great musician to sing some of those characters. Boy, oh boy, hard to hear. Like something I notice in my students, we don't really teach the traditional arias as much anymore in colleges. It's kind of become a thing where you're not, you're supposed to teach all the contemporary. And I love contemporary music and LGBTQ composers and African American composers and women composers, but a student cannot sing John Musto songs or Ned Rorem if they can't hear Mozart. Mozart is where we develop our ears because it's tonal and we learn how to negotiate through our range. And it makes sense to our ear and our voice, and we can fit it together. We can work on intonation and create character. Then we can say, ooh, I want to do this really avant-garde piece. Or I want to do, if I had not sung Mozart and had really great intonation, I could never have sung King Harold's Saga. Never. And I don't have perfect pitch, but I got to a point where I was working on that piece, and most of the pieces started on a C5, which is the C above middle C. And so I could walk into any classroom that had a piano and I could sing that C because I knew where it lived in my voice. And it just the muscle memory because I practiced it so much. But I could not have sung that without Mozart. Thank you, Mozart.
I see Jane has a hand up, and then there's a chat question from Anne after that.
Great.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I'm Jane. I think our fear as we get older, particularly sopranos, that we're going to have that wobbly voice, that vibrato, we're going to lose control. For some reason, as I've gotten older, the older I get, the broader my range has gotten. And I still have a very, very high range. If I could sing above the C above middle C and on up all the time, I would have more control. But as soon as I start going down, I lose that control. And sometimes we can't always hear ourselves. And I'm like, I don't want to be that person. So is it exercise?
It's one of those things probably where the thing about singing up really high is you really have to have your support under you, and you have to have the airstream like at the optimal speed. Singing high takes a lot of air, and it's got to be running through pretty fast because your vocal folds are so stretched, and there's not tightness, but there's tension in them in order to keep them together so they can vibrate. As you come down, you may be losing some of your connection to your support. That's where the wobble comes in, right? And so what you have to do is as you come down your range, you've got to figure out a new balance. It doesn't stay the same. So singing a middle C does not have the same support and airspeed and vocal balance of vocal closure to airspeed as a C5 does, as a C6 does. And so practicing through that range, doing 5-note scales slowly in each part of your range to develop what is the support that I actually need here. Maybe you're using too much air and that's what's causing the wobble because you're used to the air in the high register. So that's some things that I would play with, is I would play with balance. Don't be afraid of your middle register. You probably don't want to practice there very much because you're thinking that it's going to be a wobble. And if we don't practice, then we do have the wobble, right? Because that's what we're afraid of. And we always avoid what we fear, and then it continues to not sound good. So I would say, be brave, get in there, and find a piece that works your middle range so that you love singing in there. And then you won't fear it so much because you'll enjoy going to that.
Good. Thank you.
Helps. Yeah.
No,
If you have more questions on that, you can always send me an email.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. And
so Anne in the chat asked, what changed in society that made audiences more accepting of women taking these roles over from early opera when all roles were performed by men?
Very good question. And I thought about introducing who asked this question?
That was Anne Hayes.
Anne. And I don't know who Anne is. Can Anne?
Anne's off camera now, but she's on
Okay,
the call.
okay. Sorry, Anne. Yeah, that's totally fine. So I thought about doing a whole section on the castrati, but I didn't have time. And that's the thing. If you think back to Shakespeare and early opera, right? It was men played women's roles. So women were not allowed to be on the stage, right? It was not appropriate for what we were supposed to do in society, which was take care of the men, bear the babies, cook dinner, do those things. So then, I'm not sure, chicken or egg, castrati fell out of favor. Women started demanding that they be able to play some of the female roles. I'm not sure which came first, but the castrati, they stopped castrating men to have the soprano roles, right? So who's going to sing them? They were written for that range. Who could sing them? Women could sing them. So then suddenly women, I think, started having an opportunity. I think there were composers like Mozart, a rebel, who would, flout society, and he would say, oh, I'm not supposed to have women in the opera. I'm going to have women in the opera. They're not supposed to sing like this. I'm going to make them sing like this, I'm not sure I'm not sure I actually have an answer to that. But it's a great question. And I want to look at the question again. More accepting of women taking these roles. Yeah, I think it was necessity. I think men said, I'm not going to be castrated. Thank you. I'm not going to do that for a living. So suddenly we needed somebody to sing the female roles.
Well, also, wasn't it, I mean, women in theater didn't have that great a reputation, right?
In order to be in theater, you had to be the bad girl, almost, right? I mean, we're talking about, this is really an interesting kind of part of society, right? And different roles. And we think about women's roles even in the 50s yet, right? They didn't have the opportunities. The women who ended up having careers as engineers that weren't just teachers or nurses, or homemakers, which is a very difficult job, takes a lot of time and energy, and doesn't always get much credit. Suddenly, I'm not sure where I was going with that. Lost my train of thought. But I do think that things started to change. Women got into music schools. Women started being composers and conductors, and now opera directors. They're starting to have more impact, bringing their ideas. What would Frauen Liebe und Leben have sounded like if it had been written by a woman about a woman's life and love instead of a man? Right? I mean, if you think about perspective, and it's not that Schumann's music isn't good. I've sung it many times and it's beautiful. It's wonderful to sing. I love it. And I can sing it better now than I ever could when I was in college. But what if Clara Schumann had written that? Right? It would have been very interesting.
I went to a concert this last weekend that was Fanny Mendelssohn, and some of her works actually ended up being published under her brother's name because her father wouldn't let her publish, and so she would do the salons, the small salons. That's actually was her outlet, and so it's interesting you brought that up. And then the other point is after the father passed away, then her brother now has the estate and the control, and he also would not let her publish. And so she published under his name. So I think maybe some of these, as more doctorates in music are investigating these, I think we might find that some of the pieces that or works that we think have been done by men, they might not have been. I've all I do for the last 20 years, quite frankly, is I question anything that I think is normal or really happened. I'm not sure. I have to relook at that.
Right. Yes, that's a very good point. Yeah.
For those of you that attended last month's masterclass with B.E. Boykin, composer B.E. Boykin, she spent a good amount of time in her presentation talking about the barriers that she faced as a woman composer of color in particular that still exists today because B.E. Boykin is a youngster. She's a young composer. So if you haven't had a chance to check out that masterclass, I would check it out. That is a free masterclass, and you can just access it on demand on Encore creativity.org. I did have a question, Natalie, for you.
Mhm.
I noticed as we were listening to some of the more modern opera that it was uh, different sounding in many ways than some of the quote unquote classical opera. It was a bit avant-garde. It was sometimes quite atonal, almost like 12 tone in ways, like a Berg.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're seeing in modern opera in general, or is that something that women composers, by and large, are doing in opera right now?
No, I'm seeing that kind of across the board. I'm not only seeing it in opera, but I'm seeing it in choral music, and I'm also hearing it in art song. I mean, it really is. It's like there's a thought that traditional sounds are boring or too normal, too usual, and and people are trying to find something unusual, I think, to make their to make their name, but maybe it's also the subject matter. I think sometimes the subject matter that um, people are using is more fraught with uh, really rough, tough emotions, and the music, in order to really kind of lash out and and explore what that emotional content is, it can't be something that sounds pretty because it isn't pretty, right? It's I think about Maria Callas and her willingness to sound ugly if the emotion was ugly. And I always admired her and loved watching her for that reason. It wasn't always the prettiest sound, and I think in some ways she hurt her voice. Um, but wow, she was willing to commit to what that character was feeling and let that really drive the emotion, the sound, the physicality. That's what I see a lot in the contemporary ones too. Is there's a lot more physicality to the singing. Like you've got to get your body into it because this stuff is hard, it's strenuous, and it takes from your toes to the end of your hair to be able to really support your voice and not hurt this. If you do it right just from here and you're not using the rest of your physicality, you're going to blow this, you know? And it's like even in the L'amour de loin that we were the last one, all of a sudden she was singing these really high leaps and she's kind of crunched up and I'm thinking, how is she doing that, um, her body is all crunched up and yet she really was bringing physicality to it. So
That's interesting. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Dr. Lerch?
Well, I just have a comment about your previous question about the atonality. Aren't we as humans hardwired to appreciate tonality? Why would composers want to go out of their way to be atonal most of the time? I mean, I can appreciate a little atonality here and there, as you were saying, for expression, but a completely atonal,
well,
piece.
in some ways, I think you have to look at it kind of the musical culture, right? So if you think about what was, they came out of chant, right? And all of a sudden they started doing, in some of the sacred music, you'd have these cross relations, right? Where one part is singing an F natural and one part singing an F sharp. And that was like, and then you have the tritone, and you're not supposed to use the tritone. And so composers were using it all over the place, right? They were sneaking it in. They were putting it between two parts. They weren't, right? They were hiding it in there. And it's like it's a development out of what people expect to push that envelope a little bit, right? And it shoves us into a new era of what our ears can handle and accept and learn to sing and learn to hear. And then that's acceptable for a while. And then something new, another composer gets an idea, oh, I don't want to be restricted to that. I want to go here. And so they get kind of sneaky and they figure out how to work the new thing in, right? And then suddenly we're in the Baroque. Right? And then that's normal. And then they break out and they start doing things and they're in the classical. And then suddenly, like Mozart's not, everything's supposed to be balanced in the classical period. And he wants to put a dissonance on a downbeat. You can't do it. You're not allowed. So he writes appoggiaturas. So all of a sudden, he has created a new ornament that allows the singer to sing a dissonance on a downbeat, but it doesn't look like it on paper because that was not allowed. So he was pushing the envelope, right? And that takes us into a new. So I think it's part of the development. And I keep thinking to myself, when is it going to happen? When is it going to come around? Just like bell bottoms, right? They're now called flares, right? So when is it going to come around where all of a sudden we're singing chant again? Because things have gotten so atonal that nobody knows how to sing a unison. And all of a sudden people go, oh, look, I could have everybody singing on a unison. And all of a sudden there we are. So we'll see, maybe next year. Maybe I'll write a new chant and take us out of atonality into one line, one melody. Then
Mary, I promise you I won't program any atonal music for Encore Creativity.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you do, you have to have an atonal music hearing course, right?
Yeah,
so that everybody
right.
can learn to hear it.
Well, I know who to call.
I don't mind the occasional dissonance. I think that's, that livens things up a little, but really, I really wouldn't want to do a 2 or 3 minute atonal.
Oh, Mary, it'd be good for you.
Let's just do a little John Cage.
There you go.
We could just sit in silence for 4 minutes and 33 seconds.
Yep. I don't know. It's been done before, though. We'd have to have something else, right? We'd have to have like some really annoying sound that would interrupt, right? And that would then be our new thing.
There is a piece that is an arrangement of a Bach chorale called "Come Sweet Death." It's called Bach Again. It's arranged by a composer last name Sandberg, that sets up atonality in a really interesting way. They have the choir sing the 4-part chorale together at regular tempo, and then they come back and they do the first 16 measures again at a very slow tempo. And while that slower part of the chorale is being sung, the choir mimics the English with some gestures so that the audience starts to see where the singer is in the vocal phrase by the gesture they're making. And this is where the atonal part comes in, each singer sings the first 16 measures at any speed, any tempo that they want. And so that every single different person in the choir, whether it's 16 people or 80 people, they all finish at the same time. And it sounds like this tapestry of sound. You can only tell where a singer is based on their hand gesture. And then the final chord is Bach's, but only after everyone spends however long they want singing their 16 measures. Wow. So it gets a little atonal in there. And I feel like the payoff is that return to tonality. Mm-hmm. It's that we start in atonality and end in atonality that is difficult for me sometimes.
Yeah, because how do you know you've ended?
Right. Yeah. other than music stopping.
Right.
Yeah. Any other questions for Natalie? This has been lovely. Thank you so much, Natalie.
Oh, you're welcome. This was great. Really fun. I really
Yeah, and
enjoyed
there were quite a few folks registered for this masterclass. So for those of you that weren't able to catch it live, welcome. I hope you enjoyed the the replay of this wonderful class with Dr. Natalie Lerch. We will be back for one more masterclass in April. Not ready to announce it yet, but it'll be probably towards the end of April, and that will close out our masterclass series for this regular season. But we're toying with some options for the summer. We're going to do some summer sessions, of course, for our chorale and rockers, and that will run in July and August. More on that soon, and we're hoping to get some summer master classes going as well. So thank you, Natalie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It was great to see everyone. Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a wonderful evening.
Okay. Good night.